Good. We're learning as Chusru for Shlema Filan Chaya Baserach. We're on Daf Yud Tes Amud Beis, the middle of the blot. On the previous blot, on the bottom, we had mentioned the memra of Rav, about 8 lines at top. Amar Rav from the bottom. Amar Rav kol makom shehichser akasa b'Toras mincha einei la'ak. Hichser and lo hichser lo. Rav says that in the din of mincha, those din that apply to mincha, the only ones that are ma'akiv, what is ma'akiv? Those things that are repeated in the pasuk. But if it wasn't repeated, that's not included. There's no equal. So now we're a little bit more than halfway down on your test Amud Beis. Amalei Rav Kahana v'Rav Asi l'Rav. Rav Kahana and Rav Asi asked Rav, V'hari Hagasha de Tonaber Kra v'loy ma'akiv. Hagasha was repeated, and it's not ma'akiv. You're saying whenever it's repeated by a mincha, it is ma'akiv, and if it's not, it's not. But Hagasha, which is the din that the mincha has to be brought close to the mizbeach before it gets burnt. The kaimitz actually has to be brought to the mizbeach before it gets burnt, and it's not ma'akiv. Man Tanabei, where do we see that the pasuk repeated the requirement of Hagasha, of bringing the kaimitz close to the mizbeach? T'chsev zois teres ha-mincha hakre v'oisa b'nei Aaron lifnei Hashem. We had said before that the Torah says that you have to bring the mincha, the kaimitz, to the mizbeach, and then it repeats again. Zois teres ha-mincha hakre v'oisa b'nei Aaron. You also have to. It says it a second time. Second or no? That second time is not to tell you that you have to bring it close, but rather saying this din of Hagasha that was previously stated, it was telling you how it should be performed. It's saying it has to be brought to a specific corner of the mizbech. The Tanya, Lifnei Hashem. There it says you have to bring magish, you have to bring the kaimitz Lifnei Hashem. Yachal b'mayr. So normally Lifnei Hashem means opposite the opening of the Oyel Moed. We've had this several times before, that Lifnei Hashem is in front of the opening to the Heichel. Tamalayma al pnei mizbeach. Therefore, the Torah says al pnei mizbeach. The front of the mizbeach, is the side that has the ramp, and the ramp is facing toward the south. So al pnei mizbeach yachal b'darm. So maybe it should be on the south. Tamalayma Lifnei Hashem, but the Torah said Lifnei Hashem, which is the western side toward the Kodesh Kodashim. So where does it go? Hakeitzad magisha bekeren droimus maravis keneged chudash al keren. You take on the southwestern side, that accomplishes both. The southwestern corner, that accomplishes both being opposite the opening to the Heichel on the west, and the ramp that's on the south was the Pnei HaMizbech. V'daya. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yachal Yigishenu l'Marava Shel Keren. Maybe you should bring it l'Marava Shel Keren. What's the vav again? Oh, this is the nightmare. Tevas Oynimcha. Okay, it just takes out l'Droima Shel Keren. Maybe you have to do both. Maybe you have to take both to the. It says western and it says southern, so you have to do both of them. Amrit kol makom she'atem moitzu shtei mikrois, echad mekayim atzmo mekayim chaveri, ve'echad mekayim atzmo mevatel es chaveri, menichin es mekayim atzmo mevatel chaveri, v'toiv shenesh mekayim atzmo mekayim chaveri. He says, since there is an option that you can do the Hagasha to the corner, and that will satisfy both the south and the west, so you do that option. When you do it, you're being mekayim l'fnei Hashem. How are you being mekayim l'fnei Hashem by doing it on the corner? The Gemara is asking, where do we see that by doing it on that southwest corner, you're still being mekayim l'fnei Hashem? That's opposite the opening of the Heichel. I don't know if you remember this, but we've had a number of times questions about where exactly the Mizbeach was located in relation to the opening to the Heichel. So Amar Rashi, because the whole Mizbeach was toward the northern part of the Azara, which means that the southern side of the Mizbeach was not past the opening. If the Mizbeach was placed in the middle of the Azara, then it could theoretically be that part of it, the southern part, would be toward past the opening of the Heichal. We'll go and to the Van Amar that the whole thing was in the Tzafin. The whole Mizbeach was in the Tzafin, and therefore its southern part, it was all in the north. It was pushed over to the north. The southern half of the Mizbeach was opposite the opening. Maskef lo Rav Huna. Huna asks another question on this statement of Rav's that he said that the things that are ma'akev by mincha are because the Torah repeated them. Maskal of Huna harim melach, the mitzvah that you have to salt anything that goes on the mizbeach, that which we still put salt on our challah on Shabbos is a zecher to that which we put salt on those things that were burnt on the mizbeach, the things that were hukrav on the mizbeach. There's no repetition of the pasuk, which we're going to ask. Gemara says that there are many mentions by mincha, but the Gemara is asking now at this point, there's no repetition. And yet, if you try to bring a mincha with a kaimitz, if you try to burn the kaimitz without bimakta the kaimitz without salt, it's possible. The Tanya, bris melach haylamhu. The Torah says that legabi the mincha that it's a bris melech olam shetahei bris amura b'melech. That means that this bris this is a bris legabi melech that it should always be on every on a carbon. So if you look at Rashi, we're going to see another sheet. This is Rabbi Yehuda. I'm going to say Rabbi Shimon. It's like the top Rashi bris amura melech shalei tifsek mi karbanos. They should never have a carbon that doesn't have melech. Bein Rabbi Yehuda, bein Rabbi Shimon. Lekamidi elamashmais darshan. They both agree about the final result. They're just arguing about where we see that from. What's the drasha? So Rabbi Yehuda says it says bris melech olam. So that means that it's something that's required. It's ma'akev. Rabbi Shimon oimenema kam bris melech olam. Hu v'nema lahalam bris kunas olam. We compare the bris of melech to the bris of kahuna. Just like it's clear that you can't have a carbon without a kayin doing it. So he says it comes from the hekesh, I guess, to kaihanim. The first mandama said it's just evident from the words itself. Rabbi Yehuda said it's evident from the words bris melech olam. That means it's ma'akev. He says it comes you learn it from kahuna. But in any case, the question is, we're seeing it's not coming from the repetition, but it's rather a limud. Rav said that the only dinim that we learn le'ikuva on mincha is from repetition. Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Kahana didan srile the Amar loy melech kosher, loy malach kosher. I'm sorry, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav, I read that wrong. Ketana didan srile, he holds like the Tana of our Mishnah. It's very dim lighting in the room that I'm in, so it's a little hard to see. The Amar loy melech kosher, loy malach kosher. That it says if you taka don't need salt at all. So not only is it he held it's not likuva. So we're asking from these people who say from a different source, not from repetition, that you need to salt your mincha, and if you didn't do so, it's possible. But we're saying, Rav says you only learn things from repetition. You don't learn from other pesukim. When it says no, but he doesn't agree to that din. Hitaka doesn't hold that. He doesn't hold of the limudim, and he says that malach is not likud. Amalei abaya ihachi leyatzik nami. We had started right at the beginning of this in this last Mishnah that we said lo yotzak is kosher, Does lo yatzak mean lo yatzak klal? Does lo yatzak mean that if he didn't do any, this is the final sprinkling of oil on the mincha? So we had said right after the Mishnah, we said Ela lo yatzak kayin elazar. We had touched. It doesn't mean that there was no yitzik at all, that they didn't sprinkle that last sprinkle of oil, but it means it was done by a kayin. It was done by a zar instead of el kayin, and that's what we're saying is kosher. So hachanami le'malach kayin elazar. When we say we're trying to answer that Rav is going holds that melach, the requirement of melach is not likuva. He's saying that's not when the Mishnah says you have to le'malach kosher. It doesn't mean that you didn't do malich at all. It's like le'yatzak. Le'yatzak means that it was done by a zar. So maybe le'malach, if it's done by a zar, is also kosher. Amalei v'chital al daitach shezar karav l'gabi mizbeach. He said, no, that you can't contemplate such a thing. It's possible to say that a layotzak kayin elazar is kosher, but we know that there's a din that a zar is not allowed to go on the mizbeach. They're not allowed to do any avoid on the mizbeach. That's a pasuk. That's midiraisa also. So how could it be that someone who does avoid on the mizbeach, a zar does avoid on the mizbeach, is kosher? Even though the Mefarshim ask, maybe maybe he's being over two things. He's either doing avodah on the mizbech as well as that, but the avodah maybe is kosher. So that's they have different answers for that. But it's so Gemara. So therefore, this is not a possibility. You can't say because lo yotzak means a kayin. It doesn't. That would not be a possibility by malicha. V'iba yisema, another possible teretz to this. Even the ksiva bei bris command the tana bei kradamya. This is not a kasha. Why melach? They have different psukim to teach it. The requirement of melach on a mincha, since the Torah says a bris, that's as if it was repeated. Suck the Gemara. Now the Gemara gets to the question of tana bei kra. Our whole question was based on the fact that according to Rav, he says you only learn things are likuva by mincha if they're repeated. And melach, we seem to learn from psukim, not from repetition. But we have psukim that repeat the requirement of melach. There's a second pasuk. We brought a pasuk on Amid Beis that says Kol Trumas HaKadoshim Hayumu Bnei Yisrael Hashem Nasat L'chem V'nechel L'vnei Techit L'chok Elam Bris Melech Elam Hi. And now we have also a pasuk V'chol Kol Mechasecha B'Melech Timlech. So we do have a repetition. So what was the kasha in the first place? That's to tell you a different rule. And this we're going to have a long brisa that's a little bit hard to decipher, and the Gemara is going to go at length going through the different reinterpreting what the brisa says. It says in the brisa, "Ilu nemar carbon b'melach." Had the Torah just said carbon b'melach, shemeani afilu eitzim v'dam, shenikru carbon. I might think if the Torah had just said, right, we just quoted that the Torah says, "B'chol carbon minchasecha b'melech timlech." Why does it have to say "Kol carbon minchasecha b'melech timlech"? Let it just say carbon b'melech without minchasecha. I would have said if it would just said that, I would include that since the Torah is saying a carbon needs melach, that would even mean the wood that you put on the mizbeach and the dam that you put on the mizbeach will also need to be salted. And the only things, the hint of this is the only things that are salted are things that are hooked on the mizbeach, that they're burnt on the mizbeach, not these things. That's what's going to be the end. But the Gemara is saying I would have thought so if it wouldn't have said min chasecha. But the Gemara said the havamin is I would say even eitzim, even wood and blood that gets thrown on the mizbech, wood that's burnt on the mizbech, and dam that's thrown on the mizbech should also need salt in them. Talmud loyma mincha. We learn out from mincha. Ma mincha miuchedes shacherim bayin chayvela. What is unique about mincha? That there's something else that has to go. Mincha. When we say mincha, we're referring to the kaimetz that's hooked there on the mizbech. So we're saying a mincha is the hakaimitz is always burnt with wood. It has to go together. It has something accompanying it. It has wood accompanying it. Av kol she'acherim b'in chayvela. Only those things that are similar. But eitzim, nothing is brought as an accompaniment for wood. Wood is an accompaniment for the kaimitz. It burns the kaimitz, but the kaimitz is not the ikar is the kaimitz. And the same thing, the dam just gets thrown on the mizbeach. There's nothing that goes along with it. So those are the things that get sold. So the Gemara, why do you say that? I have another possible way of interpreting it. Maybe instead of looking at those that have something else that accompanies it, maybe look at which thing is matir, something else. Say that a mincha, the kaimitz is matir, the shirayim to be eaten. So let's say anything that has something that's matir, something else. So the dam is matir, the emurim to be burnt on the mizbeach, and it's matir, the basar to be eaten by the owners. It says me'al minchasecha, it means that comes to exclude and not from your dam. Yachal tehe mincha kula tu'una melech. The Gemara says maybe when we say al kol minchasecha that a mincha needs kol kol minchasecha b'melech timlech, maybe it doesn't mean the kaimitz. Maybe it means also the shirayim. That before you eat it, before the kohen eats it, he has to put melech on it. Tamalayim carbon to on melech v'ein mincha kula tuna melech. The part that's hukrav, that's brought on mizbeach, needs melech, but not the part that's eaten by the kohen. This is still the brisa. The brisa says v'ein liyela kaimitz. I would only know the kaimitz of a mincha minayin l'rabes as halavayna. How do we know to include also the levayna that comes along with the kaimitz, that it also needs melech? It gets burnt on the mizbeach. How do we know that that needs melech? I include it because it goes in one kli. The Gemara later on is going to ask, before we said that everything that is that it's acherim bayin chayvala, and l'chayr levayin is also acherim bayin chayvala. It also gets burnt with wood. So what do we have to say? Shchein bayin ma b'kli echad. The Gemara is going to explain, have a different way of understanding this part of the brisa. Different than the way I just typed it, it's going to reinterpret it. But first the brisa continues. How do I know to include levayna that's not part of a mincha? There's such a thing as someone dedicates levayna on its own as a carbon. Or levayna haba b'vazichen, the levayna that comes in the vazichen together with the lecha mishnah, that also gets fully burnt without anything accompanying it. There's no kaimitz. All these things are going to be things that don't have a kaimitz with it. Vaktyrus, the ktyrus that is burnt twice a day, and the Shita Megretz puts in above uminchas kayanim, the mincha of a kayan that's fully burnt again without a kaimitz, uminchas kayan mashiach, and the mincha of a par kayan mashiach. The mincha of the chavite kayan gadol, which is all fully burnt, uminchas nisachim, the mincha that comes along with certain karbanos that is fully burnt, emure chatas, the emurim of chatas, ve'emure asham, ve'emure kachi kachim, the emurim of kachi kachim, which they understand to mean talking about the kivsei atzeres, ve'emure kachim kalim, and the emurim that are burnt on the mizbeach kachim kalim, ve'irei oila, the actual avarim of the oila that gets burnt in totality, in addition to the emurim. Oila sa'if and oila sa'if, that the whole bird gets burnt. Minayin, how do you know all these things need melech? Tamaloim al kol korbanecha takrav melech. That's what the pasuk says, al kol korbanecha, on all of them. Okay, so that's the end of the brisa. Amar ma, ein li ela kaimitz, which we said mincha, ein li ela mincha, minayin l'rabes es halavayna. How do we know to include also lavayna? Ma'abin is lavayna, shchein boi ma b'kli echad. What are we saying? It's because it's boi ma b'kli echad. V'amad ma mincha miyichadish acherim ba'an chayvala. We already gave a different reason, that anything that has an accompaniment is going to be mechuyev melech, and levayna is also mechuyev. It's burnt with wood. Hachikama, aim a carbon cloud. So Gemara says this whole thing was really a different conversation. The Brisa was suggesting eber carbon cloud or mincha prat, kol prat ein bechlal ala masha prat, mincha in midei achrin alay. that would mean if it's a klalu prat, the prat says only what's in the prat and nothing else. So only a mincha needs melech and nothing at all else. Hada amar al kol korbanecha chaz of a klal. Klalu prat the klal iyatadan elkein prat. Ma prat before shacherim boin chayvelav kol shacherim boin chayvelav. So the discussion about the levina was not that we were saying that we learned it out from the pasuk. It was to tell you, the carbon was to tell you that it's not a klalu prat, it's a klalu pratu klal. So really, so we have to say carbon to tell you that's a klalu pratu klal, and once then we have to say what is the standard of determining what the prat is. When you have a klalu pratu klal, it means things that are daima to the klal. So that's achem shabayin lachayva. So it's not two separate limudim; they're two parts of the same limud. First the limud to tell, first the pasuk carbon to tell you that's a klalu pratu klal, and then achem bayin lachayva. Zakt Gemara, Ema levina. In fact, the Gemara, let's say that that levina includes. I'm sorry, I skipped a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if I'm including this parentheses or not. What's the base? Bach? I don't know. I can't find it. Oh, here it is. It's not a Bach. Okay, we'll leave it out. Levina, Ema Levina, v'aisi. Let's say I'll learn out that Levina, that it should also be. It should also be maybe let's say that when we say that we're learning other things, that will also include the levina, because that comes together. It's something that acherim ba'al lachayva, and then I'll learn dam. I see dam the ikanasachem. Let's say dam is also acherim ba'al lachayva, because dam also is what's mate, what brings along when you finish the kapara by being zarek the dam. That enables you to also bring the sachem that gets that accompanies certain karbanis. You can only bring those nesachim that you pour on the mizbech. It's the yayin gets poured on the mizbech. That only comes after the kapara of the dam, after you azarek the dam. Zakdamar, no, the nesachim are not primarily associated with the dam. Nesachim had emurim hudasu. The nesachim are really coming together with the emurim, which are the chalev that gets burnt on the mizbeach. It's not directly associated with the dam. My time. Why is it more associated with the emurim rather than with the dam? Achila v'shtiya, because the emurim is eaten by the mizbeach, and the sachem is the wine that's poured on the mizbeach. So they're like two sides of the same coin. One is the achila, one is the shtiya. In fact, the Gemara, adarabba, kapara v'simcha. Why don't we say that the dam is the kapara, and the nesachim are the simcha that follows? Let's see the Rashi 3 lines down in the wide lines. Adarabba, l'tzarech damasu. The nesachim are following the dam. Dachi urcha acher kapara's dam shekipar alechet. After the kapara that the dam brings, that's mechaper on the chet. Bahayayin hamsameach elekim va'anoshim. Comes the wine that's misameach. Damish neskaper chetoy sameach. The misha neskaper chetoy sameach. Someone who is get a kapara is sameach. So maybe the nesachim should really be associated with the dam rather than the emurim, and if that's the case, it should also require melach. So Gemara levoina boim abukliach and nesachim in boim bekliach. We make a different. There's a different reason why nesachim, why a dam doesn't need melach, because the thing that's boy acherim boyim lo ima is nesachim, and nesachim are never that closely associated with the dam. They're not put into the same kli, but the kaimitz together with the levina, they both were originally in the same kli before you separated them in order to do the kmitza, and now they're going back on the mizbeach together, so they're more closely associated. So you could say acherim bayin lachayva. Aval eitzim ki hechad iskashbu mincha hachim iskashbu kulu karbonis. But eitzim, that which eitzim are the thing that accompanies a mincha and allows you to burn it. So therefore, they're considered to get that. That's why the mincha has melach. So it's going to be the same thing by all the other things that were listed. All the other karbonis that require melach, they're also together. They're all going to be mechuyev melach because they are similar to they need to be burnt just like the mincha. We had suggested as an alternate, instead of looking at cherem boyin chayv, that something accompanies it, maybe you should look at that at the fact that it's materes. And we're saying maybe you need both. Maybe it has to be both something that has an accompaniment, as well as that it's mater something else. It makes qualify something else to be eaten or to be burnt. Of course, cherem boyin chayv lo materes. Umay niu. What would that be? The levina that goes together with the lechem hapanim, the sharia lechem, it allows the lechem, and it's also burnt on the mizbech, so it has a cherem boyin lechayva. Maybe nothing else should have melech, just the mincha and the levina above bezichin. It's like the Gemara, no. From the fact that we have another pasuk, the Torah says me'al mincha secha, and it doesn't say, which comes to tell you not v'loy me'al damecha, but not from Yadam. It must be that otherwise dam would have been included, but dam is not something that has acherim boyin l'chayv. It doesn't get burnt. It has nothing accompanying it. So it must be that it's only one of those two requirements or qualifiers that are going to determine what is included in the klal, in the prat, I should say. Amar mar, me'al minchasecha ve'al medamecha. We say me'al minchasecha, you give melech on those things that are in your mincha, but not that's on your dam. Ve'ema me'al minchasecha v'lei me'al evirecha. Why are we saying that's coming to exclude dam? Maybe it's coming to exclude that you don't put salt on the evarim when you bring an oila and you put the evarim on the mizmeach. Maybe those things, that's what it was saying, doesn't need melech. So the Gemara mistavim have evarim havalei l'rubuya. The Gemara says there's more reason to say that evarim need melech than dam. Shechein, because it's similar to mincha in these ways. Shechein achayim bayin chayvala. Like we said, it's also burnt, so it has the wood going with it, and kamaisa just like a mincha. Ishim kamaisa, it's burnt like the kaimitz of a mincha. B'chutz kamaisa, it's done in the azara like a mincha. And again, none of these things will apply to the evarim. The evarim, I don't know why the evarim is not acherim bayin l'chayva and ishim kamaisa. What does it mean? What evarim are we talking about? Zak the Gemara. What does that mean? Right, I'm saying, so these things are more like a mincha because it does have this. Masha'inkin dam does not have it. We're comparing it to mincha. I'm sorry, I got mixed up. We're comparing it to dam as opposed to we're comparing the evarim to dam. So dam is not acherim barim. It's not burnt, and it doesn't have wood going along with it. B'chutz kamaisa, and also evarim are burnt only on the mizbeach hachitzon. Masha'inkin dam, the azrikas of the dam b'fnim in the heichal. Noisa kamaisa, tuma kamaisa, me'ila kamaisa. All these things apply to the evarim, but they don't apply to dam. That noiser, if it's left over, you're going to be chayiv for noiser. If it becomes tumah, eating it, but tumah is chayiv. Tumah and me'ila having hana from it. So that's the reason. All these are reasons when the pasuk is excluding something, is excluding dam and not evarim. In fact, the Gemara adarabba dam havalebuy shechem mater kamaisa. Dam in a way is more similar to the kaimitz because it's a mater, while evarim are not mater or anything. Niftal b'shkisa chama kamaisa, and also the dam has to be the day that you shech the carbon. They have to be zayrik the dam that same day, but the evarim you have a whole night to do it. So Gemara hanach nefishin. There you had I think 6 reasons to compare it to Avarim, to say Avarim should need Melech like the Mincha, and yet only two reasons to compare it to Dam, so we stick with the Avarim, to say that it's Marba Avarim. Amar Mar, Sheme'ane afilu Eitzim and Dam shenikru carbon. We said, I would say even Eitzim and Dam, they should also be included like the Mincha, because they're called a carbon. Man Sham Dam Eitzim Ikri carbon. Who calls, where do we get this, that wood is called a carbon? Rebbe, that's according to Rebbe. Fact the Gemara, l'Rebbe mi boy melech. It can't, but that doesn't make any sense. We're saying I would say even eitzim v'dam should need melech, so we learn it from a pasuk that they're not included. But according to Rebbe, eitzim do need melech. Rebbe holds that you do have to salt the wood before you burn it on the mizbeach. The Tanya, carbon. The Torah says carbon melamed she mistaven eitzim, that you could be misnadav eitzim on their own as a carbon, as a donation to be burnt. Bekama, what's the shear of that? Shnei gazrin, shnei gzirin, two big blocks of wood. V'cheinu oima, and where do we see that there's such a thing as giving eitzim to be burnt on the mizbeach? V'garelos he found all carbon eitzim, and they made garelos, and it determined who's going to bring the carbon eitzim. So you see, eitzim is called a carbon. Rabbi says it additionally, eitzim carbon mincha to unim melech. He says eitzim is a kind of mincha, and it needs melech. So this is the kasha. How could you say, I would think that dam and eitzim need melech, so we have a pasuk that tells you not like that. But Rebbe holds that you do need melech on eitzim. So we said since it's called a carbon, I would think it needs melech. But Rebbe is the man who says that melech is called a carbon, and he holds that Taka does need melech. But to continue the member of Rebbe to Urin Hagasha, in addition, when you bring eitzim as a carbon, it also needs to be brought to the mizbeach, just like a mincha. According to Rebbe, this is a remarkable thing I never would have imagined. He says you have to take splinters of wood and do a kmitza with the wood. Rebbe's saying in a lot of ways, you can do an eitzim, you can do a matana of eitzim, a carbon of eitzim, which would be similar to a mincha. You're literally going to have to do a kmitza of it. He says that you go so far that just like you take the kaimitz of flour and you burn it, when you give a donation of wood, you have to take your wood and use other wood to burn your wood, your wood carbon. He's not making a carbon of wood. So l'chayr it's shver. How could Rebbe have said? I would have thought dam and eitzim. How could we say this can't be Rebbe, because Rebbe holds that you do bring salt. You have to put salt on a carbon. So who is the man Amar who said you see from carbon that eitzim and dam are carbon, but if Rebbe's the man Amar and he holds that eitzim do need melech. So Gemara sami mikan eitzim. You have to take out the word eitzim. Okay, we'll go with the rest of it tomorrow, as Hashem. Okay. It's later than I thought. I'm gonna have